co-founder of Seguin, and an awesome Texas Ranger. Yeah, come on in here. Yeah. And so now you're in the right side of the log cabin. So pretty much everything you see in here we discovered on the property. So all the artifacts. Now we've added, of course, extra stuff like our own books and signs, but everything was found in the attic or in the shelter, I don't know if you know the history of the Magnolia Hotel, but when Jim and I discovered it, it was on the top 10 most endangered places in Texas.
Oh, wow.
And it was in very bad shape. And so when we discovered it, we just fell madly in love with it. And so, and his background, he's a preservationist and an antique restorer, and I'm a retired museum curator and ex-tour guide. So kind of like, I think we believe that the house found us.
Found us, yeah.
Awesome. So this is we call this the smoke room, and that's because after James Campbell, who's our little gentleman here, after he was murdered, he was ambushed by Comanches on his way to San Antonio, and it was a brutal murder. And after the Texas Rangers found him, they buried him right where he lay, and which we have no idea where. And so we thought it was really proper that we had a memorial put for him out front. So we had the Texas Ranger Association come with the cannons and the guns, and so that's his cross outside. But then after he passed away, it was sold to Joseph F. Johnson, and he turned it into a stagecoach stop. And so when the stagecoach will arrive, the men would come on this side where they would drink their whiskey and smoke their cigars. So that's why we call it the smoke room.
Wow.
This is the ballroom. Again, when they would have got off the stagecoach, they would have entered into this building, and they would let the women and children be on this side, and the men would have gone on the other side. But during the time of in the 1840s, this was the gathering point of the host city, and they would hang out here for any kind of events, parties. They would have had the whole log cabin. This wall would not have been here, so it was a lot bigger. Whenever there's a funeral, they would lie in state in this room as well. And but then later on, it just became the ballrooms. Don't know who the pictures are. Some we do, some we don't. Unfortunately, they don't have the names on them, which is sad. Now, sweet-wise, we have a little lady in here who died of a broken heart. She was going to meet her husband, her future husband, by stagecoach. And so she was hanging out waiting for him, and he never arrived. And they said she just decided to stay here. She finally died. Of course, it was dehydration and starvation. But they all say she died of a broken heart. And her favorite thing to do is to flip her lights, which I was hoping she would do it for you while she was here.
Look how many are out right now.
Well, look how much she blew up. I know.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she blows them out for us, and I'm okay with it, but he has to pay for the
I
lights.
gotta change it.
Yeah, everything you see here, every piece. It was a saloon from 1850 and later all the way until 1900. And so when we bought the hotel, we really wanted to transform it back into a saloon, but we would have had to take the wall down, and that would have been bad. So we decided to bring it back into the original state of 1930s kitchen. Being that we found so many cool kitchen artifacts, we thought, well, this would be perfect for it. And I have a lot of these from my mother. And I'm going to take you, you're actually going to be exiting the saloon. So this is just the gift shop, but the gift shop was to get upstairs, you would have had the stairways right here, but now it's my gift shops. My favorite room in the entire building. I love it in here. You're actually standing in the original portion of the restaurant from 1850, so this wall would not have been here, nor this one. It was huge, but in 1930s they turned it into a home for the family of the Lanhams, and they made this into their children's room. And so we find all these old antique toys and such, so we brought them in here. Now, as far as the spirits go, this is where all our littlest spirits like to come and hang out. And their favorite thing to do is to either roll the ball or to blow the pinwheel. Sometimes we'll find marbles just rolling around in here as well. We have caught them on video, and they're fun to see, you know. And also, I wrote a book about this young lady in Haunted Magnolia and in my Haunted Seguin book, and it's all about, it has a portion of her story, and so she's pretty big in our spirit world, and she's a traveling spirit, and she likes to come and hang out with us all the time. So this is everybody's favorite room to come and visit, and it's my favorite too. You're also continuing the expansion of the original restaurant while we've not have been here. So we call this Little John's room, and that's because this mirror, I can show you. This mirror was actually in the living room when we bought the hotel, in the smoke room, and we brought the mirror back here, and then all of a sudden people started noticing faces in our mirror, and so we thought, well, we better save this. So we did save it, and sure enough, Jim and I were here, and we actually found a picture of one of the faces. That's the original, and I think he's right here. We blew it up, and you can see it's a young boy. He's an African American boy, and he was born and raised here on the property. And later on, when he became a man, we were told that he actually worked with these incredible men called the Wilsons, and they made Wilson pottery, and he actually worked with them. So the beauty of, you know, when we find these, we discover these spirits, we also discover the history of them, and so we think he's pretty cool. We call him Little John. We're actually going to turn into the restaurant. So this restaurant was huge at one time. It could seat so many people, and it was actually, they would serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner from 1850 all the way up to 1900, 50 years of breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We do know that one of the colonels, his name is Colonel Thomas Jiggy Johnson, and he lived here, and he passed away in this room. So we hear his footsteps quite often, and his cigar smoke. This is the original Magnolia Hotel that we're going to walk through, and you'll see a stairway that's split it up. So watch your head, and there's a little step down. Okay, this is the original Magnolia Hotel, and it's freezing in here. And this was actually built in 1847, and it is made out of total solid limecrete. It's made out of Dr. Parks limecrete, the famous chemist who invented this lime solution. It's actually the same solution that the Sebastopol Museum was built out of. And our coolest thing that we love about this is that it was a 3-room hotel, so it would have been 1 room, 2 room, 3 room. But the most famous thing about this room is that John Jack Coffee Hayes, the most famous Texas Ranger of all, married Susan Calvert, and her father owned the hotel during that time, and he got married right here. So this is where he got married, and what is really cool is that I read that during that time that there was nothing going on, no Comanche attacks, and the Santa Ana was, you know, kind of settled down, and so all of the Texas Rangers would have attended his wedding because he's just an amazing, you know, Texas Ranger. And so his best friend was Bigfoot Wallace, and that was my ancestor. Yeah, so it's just so cool to think that he was here when he got married. So, so this is, and then again, it's two other rooms, but this is now our home. This is where we hang out. So, all right, I'm gonna take you upstairs. You are entering the original 10-room hotel, and everything you see on the wall are all our interesting historical facts. Each one of these pictures on the wall are the original owners of the hotel. 10-room hotel of the 1850 hotel. This would have been one room that you could rent, and then it would have just gone, one room on each side. And you're also standing in our new bed and breakfast. So when you do rent our suite, you get the entire second floor. And so you get the pretty suites, and if you choose to, then you get to go on the unrestored side. We leave that up to you. But what I think is really cool is you can still see the transoms that were there. Everything that you see is original, the flooring, the doors. And this is Miss Amelia's room, Miss Amelia. And she passed away here she fell asleep and passed away in her sleep. But we think it's really, really cool is that once we discovered that, we posted on our Facebook and such, and the family members had discovered it. And so now every year they come and have a reunion for Miss Amelia, all her families. So I think it's really cool that, these stories, even though they're talk of spirits, it brings them really niceness. I don't think it's going to be open. No, she locked it. Don't take the other side. This is a room. We call this John Doe's. John Doe was actually a man who passed away, and nobody knew his name. They tested him, the whole bit, couldn't find out who he was. He's actually buried in our city cemetery. And so we thought it would be nice to at least name the room after him. We gave him the name John Doe. All right. And then for the bed and breakfast, you can actually see you get a kitchen and you get a large bathroom. But this would have been one room as well. And I'm going to take you to the unrestored side. This is our spooky side. It's going to be hot, so we'll talk even faster. All right? So this is I'd say this is only about 80% improved. And so this would have been one of the original rooms, but then later she turned it into apartments. So you're seeing it broken down into an apartment-like area. But this would have actually been the lobby area. We have, during the time in the 1850s, it had traveling salesmen like crazy. I was told that whenever a traveling salesman's day was up, they would another one would come right in. It was just a constant flow of traveling salesmen. So we like to think, this was the traveling salesman's lobby up here. Can you imagine all the discussions they must have had up here, So I love this room. We do have pictures of some of the traveling salesmen that we discovered from the area. And then this room that you're gonna go, the blue room, it actually, we call it the prisoner's room. It's got a really cool story. If you notice that in the first original jail was our Indian raid shelter. It was a jail from 1847 until 1852, and it actually, then they built the real jail, and it's 340 feet from us, and it started as a little cabin with the wall, and then later 2 stories, and then 3 stories. And if you look, you can still see it out the window. They will allow the family of the prisoners to stay in this room for free, so that they could look out the window and see the prisoner, their family member, be put into a calaboose, which is right down the street from us, and taken across the street and was hung. And so this is Pink Rosebud's room. Pink Rosebud is the very famous madam in the True Women. If you've heard about Pink Rosebud, and she was a madam. Mrs. Wood was very kind about the way she described her, but she was a madam, and she was actually quite popular, and so this room was reserved for her. And one day she just disappeared, and now occasionally when we're up here, you can smell her rose scent, and we're like, well, she came back to her room. This is our little room for Itsy. Itsy was a little girl who passed away from the yellow fever. She was just about maybe 8 years old, and when you come up here, sometimes you can hear her singing the Itsy Bitsy Fire song. And she is the most loved little spirit in the world. If you look in the crib, these are all of her toys that people bring her. And it's interesting because we'll come in and I'm like, well, she got another one. Her story is her mother was a single parent and she couldn't afford babysitting. And so whenever she would go to work, unfortunately, she would have to leave Itsy home in her room, and she lock the door with food and water and all her toys. But whenever she would get scared, she would jump in her closet that no longer is as big as it used to be. And so every once in a while we'll come up here and you can hear the door slamming just to get our attention. If you ever watched a show called Ghost Adventures, he's in Itsy's room and Itsy's slamming her door. This, you still would have been in one of the apartments. These people got a really big apartment, cute little kitchen area.
Yeah.
But this room, as far as the spirits, his name is Sam. Sam was an amazing man. He was a slave and he worked here on the property, and his only job to do was to chop wood. But he actually stood up for the man that was accused of murdering Emma. He was innocent, and Sam knew it, and Sam spoke up for William, and he really put his own life on the line
Wow.
to speak up for that. And so I think he's a pretty amazing person. So he likes to come forward. This was his room. He actually slept in when it was a room further on, and his favorite thing to do is to whistle. So we have lots of tapes of him whistling. So he's a cool guy. So take it into the last part. Everybody wants to see this room, and but later to find out that William was innocent, and so we discovered who the real murderer was, and we've been really doing further details because I want to know more about this man. But he still does hang out in here. Built the log cabin, and he used the wood that was supposed to be used for a fort here in Seguin. And so he said, well, we got the Comanches under control, we'll sell you the wood. Great. So he bought the wood, built his log cabin, and no sooner than he built the log cabin, the Indians attacked. And so what he had to do was, they didn't have any shelter for the women and children, so they hand dug this shelter out so that women and children could come and hang down here whenever there was a raid. And so the last raid was in 1855 on the 4th of July, and that's when the Comanches came and kidnapped 3 men. And so Mrs. Reed, who owned the hotel during that time in 1855, she came down here with all the Seguin women and children. They were down here sharpening their knives and making bullets just in case there was going to be an attack, because they had no idea if the husbands were going to come back at all. The husbands did retrieve 2 of the men that were kidnapped, and 1 was not, but they did kill all the Comanches that had done the raid. And you can actually see where they would have been able to get their rifles and shoot them out the windows if need be. And then they turned it into, Seguin didn't have a jail, so they had to think of something. And so this area right here would have been the original jail. You can actually see some of the latch on the log, what it would shut down. And then it would have been 3, 1, 2, 3. And we were told through the articles that I've read that it was a very, very bad jail. That's because during the time of the Texas Rangers, they didn't believe in jails, they believed in hanging. And so when they had to bring them down here, they treated them very poorly. So yeah, and then in 1860, during the Civil War, we do know that the women of the house, they actually took care of the hotel, and she sustained herself by selling material to the soldiers. And so she was a pretty smart cookie. And so then during the time of Reconstruction, we do know that the Union soldiers can't have a camp here in Seguin. It was along the street of Riverside, and it camped all the way down from Donegan all the way down to where the church is and the Heritage Village is. But we do know that Union soldiers were in here as well, because we found lots of Union bullets. We know that the Union officers took over the hotel because it was the finest building during that time. And then after that, during Prohibition, this was a speakeasy, and it was a happening place. Whenever they were going to be raided, they would ring the bell, and the bell would ring, and then everybody would just scatter. We all have been told that there was a tunnel that actually leads from the Magnolia Hotel out to the street. We do have pictures of the end of the tunnel, but we have yet to discover exactly where the tunnel begins. We find lots of jugs, moonshine jugs, and lots of liquor bottles, and a wonderful case that actually has been used. And they must have did moonshine down here, because we actually found one of the moonshine stirrer. And this must have been some really potent moonshine. You can see how it's all burned. And it's got 3 X's on it, so we do know that that was used for that. And to this day, we still keep finding artifacts down here, lots of Indian artifacts, lots of arrowheads. And then in 1930, Inez Lanham, who owned the hotel, she used it for, she had a kiln down here, and she made pottery, and also used it for her storage. Spirit-wise, we do have 4 spirits that reside down here. We do know that 3 of them were the prisoners that were not treated very kindly down here. And then we have the woman. And the woman is, she comes out of the tunnel. Many people have seen her. They've captured her on video. The first time we opened up the hotel, everybody wanted to come in. And so this mother begged me, can I just have my kids come inside the shelter? And I thought, well, okay, I'll bring you down here. So I brought her down here, and it was, the mother was standing right here, I'm right here, and my friend was standing here. And then her husband was standing in the corner, and then her little daughter was there as well. But the little boy was right here, and he kept saying, ma'am, where's the little girl? Where's the little girl? And I thought he meant his sister, and I said, well, she's right there. And he goes, no, the little girl in the tunnel. And I went, the little girl in the tunnel? I don't know that one. And so I looked up, and there she was. She was standing right by the dad and the little girl, and he pointed, he goes, there she is. And the mother took the picture, and we caught the picture.
Hi, welcome to another edition of See Seguin with the Seguin Public Library. We are here today at the Magnolia Hotel in Seguin. This is a very, very historic hotel. It's been around since the 1840s, and we are so excited to be here. And so here we are with Erin and Ghedi.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for letting us come.
You bet. There's nothing I love more than giving a tour of this building. So
Good. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's just breathtaking. And I'm amazed at how many artifacts y'all found on the property that we get to come and look at. It's amazing.
They were everywhere. Up in the attic. The attic goes as long as the building. Cool finds. And then the shelter, we're still finding. So,
Wow. It's
yeah.
amazing. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about how y'all found the place and what led you here?
That's fun. That's a fun story. So I was writing a book called Haunted Magnolia Hotel, and I was doing a story about a little girl who sadly was, she passed away in her home, and unfortunately she was actually murdered. And I read that the murderer stayed the night at the Magnolia Hotel, the night that he committed the crime. And so I thought it'd be really cool to have a picture of the hotel in the book. So my husband and I, we went looking for it. And I couldn't find it anywhere. There was no information whatsoever on this hotel, nothing. And it wasn't, I went to go visit my sister, and she said, hey Erin, I found this and I thought you would find it interesting. And I was like, oh really? She handed it to me. It was an article that had just come out in the Gazette about the Magnolia Hotel. And I was like, it exists, you know, so we went looking for it, and we discovered it was placed in the top 10 most endangered places in Texas. And so we were convinced the owners to let us come in and just view it, because I was going to take just pictures, you know, but as soon as we walked through the door, Joe and I fell madly in love with it, and we could tell that it was at the point of possibly being demolished. And so it took us 3 months to convince the family to sell it to us, but they were at that same point where it was time for somebody to take over the reins. So we bought it, and we've been restoring it ever since, and it's taken 7 years to get here, but it's been a pure labor of love.
So cool. And the murderer who spent the night here before, does he ever act out in any way?
No, the one thing I can tell you about the Magnolia Hotel and all our spirits is that they're all kind.
Do you have a question?
Yeah, which spirit are you closer with, since we know the Magnolia Hotel is haunted?
Yes, well, I love them all, just so they know, I love them all, but I'm really close to Emma Volker, because I met her in my first book, and then I learned more about her while I was doing research on my second book, and now she's become quite famous, and she is so loved by not only me, but everybody who knows her story. So yeah, I'm a little attached to Emma, but I love the rest of them too. So.
Yeah.
Amazing. And how many do you think are living here on a regular basis?
I can tell you that we stopped counting at 13, yes, but we have several that show up from time to time who we don't really know who they are yet, but one thing that we are very persistent about is trying to discover who they are. And so, yeah, we have 13 so far.
Wonderful.
Yep, and when more come forward, it's like, oh boy, new family.
Yeah, there you go.
Keep it coming. And I could do more research. So yeah, it's a fun place. I don't want anybody to be afraid of this building. I know when you put the word haunted, it kind of makes people stand off. But if you just think about it, these are just permanent residents. So if you think of it that way, and they just want to tell their story, that's all they want to do. Thank you.
What about a favorite, like, historic fact about, or just one that you think of that's really interesting?
I think the coolest thing is that during Prohibition, I think that's a hoot, because back then it was hush hush, you know, and I'm sure the whole city knew about it, but it was kept hush hush, you know. But what a fun thing, you know, to have to brag about. Yeah, it was a speakeasy down there in the shelter, you know, and the fact that we find so many, you know, whiskey bottles and stuff. And I think to show you, but we actually have the bell that's in the shelter, and whenever there was possibly going to be a raid, they would ring the bell and they all just scatter. You know, so I think that's my most fun fact.
That was great.
Well, please spread the word that this is a nice place.
Yeah,
I want people
it
to
is.
come to visit. A lot of times they stay away because it says the haunted thing. And we hate calling it haunted. We always call them our permanent residents.
Yeah.
So treat them with respect and treat you.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you had some experiences too.